We went on this journey, and I kind of call it the good, the bad and the ugly. The building itself was there for a reason, and that reason's never going to change. I remember Paul saying to me on that day, it will take us 2 years to sort this mess out legally. And I was like, you are joking. The original seats had been sold by one of the previous unscrupulous owners. The Leyland Masonic contacted the Theatres Trust, said they were closing down. Did the Morecambe Winter Gardens want their seats back? There's nothing greater than to know that you've made an impact in your hometown.
I've always been proud of my hometown. Yeah, I've never fallen out of love with it.
Hi Paul, hi Vanessa. How
Hello.
are you?
Good afternoon, Mark. Welcome to Winter Gardens.
Thank you
and the
very much.
seagulls, you can hear the beautiful cacophony of sound.
Background music.
Shows you how good our acoustics are.
Bang on key, look. Bang on
Seaside.
key.
Thanks for having me at Morecambe Winter Gardens.
Our pleasure.
The first time I read Morecambe, I read Morecambe with my very French accent, but then I think I mentioned it, I said it the first time to you, the first time I spoke to you, Vanessa. I said Morecambe.
Oh, it's Morecambe, yeah.
And then
And people spell it wrong. They often, even in a press release recently, I saw it spelt with an O. Morecambe.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah,
Or-
Morecambe.
Or drop the E. So how would you pronounce Heysham then?
Isham.
Heysham.
Heysham, well
That's-
done. A lot of people say Heysham, so
I've had a lot of practice with my British family, so
you've done your homework.
so yeah. So can I ask you to introduce yourselves, who you are and your position at the organisation, and the name of the organisation as well?
I am Professor Vanessa Toulmin. I am a Professor of Entertainment and Film History at the University of Sheffield. And I'm also proud and privileged to be Chair of the Morecambe Winter Gardens Preservation Trust Limited.
I am Paul Anderton. I'm what you call a sand groaning. So I was born in Morecambe,
So am I.
bred in Morecambe, raised in Morecambe, and lived in Morecambe for my entire life. I was a solicitor formerly with a local practice in Morecambe. I won't name them as such. I was there for about 36 years, and I retired about 2.5 years ago to concentrate primarily on the Winter Gardens and also another commercial client in Lytham. I'm a director and a proud trustee of Morecambe Winter Gardens Limited.
It's really nice to have you here because we've got a lot of legal questions and discussions to have.
I will reply without liability.
Not just
It was a legal nightmare. So Paul
It
was
was.
essential. He was like my right-hand man, woman, person. It was a difficult period, but
This building brought us together, actually. We'd never met.
we'd never met.
until one Saturday morning, mid-November.
Yeah, and it was an extraordinary occasion because I had inadvertently become a trustee of the building, and I'm like Paula Sangronum, but it's well documented that I hadn't lived in Morecambe for 35 years. I left when I was 16. I didn't have really fond memories of the resort. Morecambe in the 80s was not a good place for various aspects of people. Other people might have different memories. My memories were pretty negative. I watched my hometown literally within a couple of years go from being a seaside resort with tourists, and we had a guest house, and we'd formerly had a fairground. And so I've always been in what you call leisure and hospitality. And I watched it go from that to suddenly becoming full of workers, become the single capital mother of the country, just become a catastrophic decline, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. But my early memories were just wonderful, yeah.
But my
Morecambe in
early
particular,
memories as a
yeah.
child are wonderful. But that particular 80s period with the consequences of Thatcher's Britain, whether you think it's good or bad, the work that was done, what happened to seaside resorts around the country is pretty much a national crisis. And Morecambe was the first one it happened to. It was one of the early ones. And I think that was what was interesting for me, that at the time, I can see it now as an academic, I can follow the trajectory. But at the time, I was just a young woman who wanted to be interested in history and art and creative ecology, what we call now. And there was nothing for me in Morecambe. So I ran away to university. And I didn't come back until 5 years ago, other than see my family, but I came back because of this building.
good transition. What is Morecambe Winter Gardens? Can you introduce the history a little bit?
This building is, well, there's two things. There's the emotional attachment. This is the building I grew up in. My family had the fairground. I'm a Sangronum like Paul, but I'm also from a long tradition of travelling show people. So my family are show people, but my mother's family also are steeped in Morecambian history. They're the Woodhouse family, so they're originally founders of Morecambe, fisher people. So I'm steeped in it. And my father was a Lancastrian. He was a freeman of Lancaster. So half of my family have got this wonderful history of travelling and entertainment, and the other half are rooted in this area. I grew up, our family had the fairground, the Winter Gardens fairground. We were basically tenants of the Winter Gardens for 70 years. So me and my brothers and sisters who are older than us would spend our childhood in and out of this theatre. When the acts came off in the interval and had a sneaky fag break outside, we'd sneak into the theatre, or they'd come on the fair. So, my memory is like both the fairground and the theatre connected.
Do you have the same memory, Paul?
My history isn't as exciting as that, no, I must admit. No. My family aren't actually Morecambians. My mother comes from North Cumbria, but she came to work in Morecambe in a hotel. My father comes from, again, Yorkshire, and he came to work in Morecambe as a coach driver for the many tourists. So I was lucky and fortunate they both settled in Morecambe. And one of my earliest memories of the Winter Gardens is my first job was to go to the railway station when I was about 8 or 9, and the promenade would just be heaving. I mean, it would be 10 abreast. Yeah, it was all buzzing, and I'd meet people off the trains, and I was a suitcase carrier. So I would carry their suitcases to their lodgings, and the first question they'd always ask me, what's on at the Winter Gardens? Who's on at the Winter Gardens? How do I get tickets? Who's on this weekend? It was always about the Winter Gardens. Yeah.
And I used to do the suitcases as well. So
did you? Yeah.
That in the 80s, where I used to work in the guest houses because we had one, and then in the morning, on the Saturday morning,
suitcases,
I would help people take their suitcases from the train station.
What did you charge, Vanessa? Did you undercut me?
Probably, I'm a bit younger than you, Paul.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is there's this narrative that all seaside resorts died because of the cheap tourism offer in the 70s. They didn't. They continued. They had a market. They had people who came. We had Yorkshire. We had, remember Bradford Fortnight?
Bradford by the Sea.
Bradford by the Sea. Morecambe, I didn't know, was built by mostly people from West Yorkshire. But I always remember the Leeds Fortnight, Bradford Fortnight. So Morecambe was very much, to me, had this long connection to Yorkshire. Everyone I knew, it wasn't like, where do your family come from? There was always somebody from Yorkshire in the family, wasn't there? Like with yours, like with mine. So there's always this kind of War of the Roses within the family. And I just find it fascinating now as a historian that this building was built by people from Yorkshire. So it has a particular cultural geography, which is unusual. And again, as an academic here, it's very unusual, the location, site, and the economics behind this building.
So how big is it? Because every time I go to a place, I'm really surprised how big it is. You always see it on videos and pictures, but when you get in, you just think, it's such a massive volume. How high is it? How wide? And
Vanessa will answer that.
I'm not going to answer such architectural questions, but what I will tell you is it was built as an extension to an existing building.
Okay.
So the original Winter Gardens opened in 1878, and it was investors from Yorkshire, from Bradford. And it was one of 3 Winter Gardens built in the Northwest. So the original Winter Gardens concept of a all-year-round attraction for the inclement weather is a Northwest, is a Lancastrian tradition, really, under the contact of Winter Gardens. The first one was Southport, the second one was Blackpool, the third one was Morecambe. They all argue who was the first or second or third, but it was very much the Northwest. And it was built as an aquarium, a sauna, hot water baths, cold water baths. And it was built as part of this rational recreation movement of the 19th century. That through entertainment and leisure, you'll civilise the mob and educate the masses, in a nutshell. So the original Winter Gardens was 1878, but it didn't work commercially. And there's a wonderful quote from the papers at the time that people would rather see a juggler than an uncooked lobster. So they turned it into an entertainment complex. And in 1897, it was sold and they built this extension. So this wonderful theatre that you're looking at is actually an extension to an existing building.
Okay.
And then sadly, in 1982, that original building was destroyed.
So why wasn't the Winter Gardens destroyed?
The original Winter Gardens was destroyed like many buildings were in the 80s. Like a purpose, it had closed in 1977, had a number of owners.
Yeah.
And it was closed. And the original building next door was destroyed, demolished. And it's like a national tragedy for me that happened. But this building was saved by the absolute tenacity of the local friends groups, and
Okay.
and they got it together. But so they are part of the story. But to that was a long and uncomfortable battle for them, but they managed it. And so by 2006, they actually bought the building. And before then, there had been 6 or 7 owners, some of them who'd stripped the building, some of them had taken out some of the fittings. There's one legendary story of the previous chair, Evelyn Archer, who was very much fundamental for the success of saving the building, stopping the owner, chiselling out some of the beautiful tiles.
Yeah.
One of the boxes at the front was taken out in one piece and sold to America. So, it's got this incredible
I think in the
history,
70s, the buildings fell into private ownership. I think that was a part
It's
of the
always
problem.
been in private ownership. It's always been private owners. But in 1977, it was no longer part of a big entertainment complex.
Okay.
They were more commercially driven. They were more entrepreneurs. They were looking to convert the buildings
No,
into offices.
they were just like,
Rogues.
well, what are they called? What you want to call asset strippers? They're just asset strippers who came in. Some of them are friends of mine, so I'm not going to be negative about it.
But
it was
they're their
different time, different circumstances, and the importance of these buildings nationally wasn't appreciated. I'm sure the Theatres Trust have all the data about the amazing, wonderful heritage in this country that was lost in the 80s.
Yeah,
Absolutely lost. When bingo halls, in fact, usually cinemas were saved when they became bingo halls. So there's lots, and that's when the building at risk register was set up in 2006 to protect buildings like this, and our building was put onto the buildings at risk register.
So there's a bit of as we mentioned earlier, there's a bit of a big legal history around
the
place.
friends. Yeah, there is.
Can you explain and detail a little bit?
Well, Vanessa's touched upon it, yeah. Again, obviously in the late 70s, the Friends were formed, yeah.
82?
Was it 82?
Okay.
Yeah, to save the building, yeah. Like-minded people obviously wanted to restore the building, save the building. It was in private ownership.
Yeah.
So the Friends were formed. At that point, they established their own charity, raised funds, again, worked very hard to preserve the building, and eventually had sufficient backing to purchase the building. But when they did so, they formed another company, the Morecambe Winter Gardens Preservation Trust Limited. Now, Vanessa keeps asking me why they did that, and I don't really have an answer to it. So they had 2 charities running simultaneously.
With different aims. So when we were the trustees of the trust, which was to maintain and upkeep and safeguard the building, whereas the Friends were there to raise funds for the building.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we had to go to the Friends to ask for money to run the building.
Were they working together at the time, or like
With the same chair?
Same chair, but there was overlaps, there was division, I think. Yeah, there was confusion. Yeah.
Okay.
There was no governance, really. The Friends were just very much on the hoof, as it were.
Yeah.
They didn't have much structure to it. They had an annual general meeting, I believe, possibly.
Okay.
But again, they didn't keep records, they didn't keep policies, they didn't... Yeah, so the governance was very light touch.
Yeah.
And it caused quite a lot of confusion.
So when did you decide, I say you, but it may be other people, when did you decide to step in?
Again, it's linked to the history of the building. In 2017, I was asked to go on, be a trustee by the previous chair, Evelyn Archer, who had majorly saved the building. She had saved the building. She obviously was chair of both charities. And there's no absolute doubt that Evelyn was a formidable building, but the complexity of this is so difficult for anyone. And some days, Paul and I get stressed about the amount of thing, and we've got a lot of support. So what I would say, in 2018, sadly, Evelyn died. And I think what really understanding then is that the actual building was built on her ambition, her zealousness, and her commitment. And once she died, there was nothing there. And so I, as a trustee, was asked legally to meet, and I met Paul. And I basically, with my kind of academic, historical head on, said, you've got to form an advisory board, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. And I found myself acting chair. I was like, I remember going in the building one afternoon and meeting everybody and coming out. But because I work in this field, I'm an expert on these buildings. My first love really was Blackpool Winter Gardens. I did 7 years there. So I went to all the national bodies for help. And really, I remember Paul saying to me on that day, it will take us 2 years to sort this mess out. And I was like, you are joking.
Legally.
legally. He said it's 2 years. And even then we didn't know what it was because there was no
paperwork, there was no
Did it take 2
documentation, no
years?
It
registers.
did take 2 years. He was
Took at
absolutely
least
right.
2 years, yeah.
It took 2 years and then COVID happened. It was hilarious. You couldn't make it up, really. Yeah.
Did COVID stop it? Give a break to it, or
COVID was interesting for us because we'd gone through that whole process. What was really instrumental during that period, I remember Claire from the Theatres Trust coming to see us. I mean, the building the ceiling had been condemned and they were still using it. There was events in there. There was people who were using the building. There was lots of things going on, but the building was making a loss. It was losing money hand over fist.
I think we were overdrawn, when we first came on board.
And we were overdrawn, and so our fantastic
overdrawn.
accountants really helped us and went through everything, put a proper accounting system in that was there but wasn't being verified in the way that they were happy with. And again, this is all reported in the Charity Commission, so it's nothing out of term. We went on this journey, and I kind of call it the good, the bad and the ugly. The good thing was the love of the building for people in Morecambe. The bad thing was the legal mess it was in, and the ugly, I suppose, was just some of the back history of what people had done. People had literally exploited this building for their own aims. Not evilling at all, but previous owners. And the repercussions of those, like somebody stealing lead from the roof, leads to 680,000 damage of the plaster 10 years on. You know, so things that happened decades ago impacts on you. So you literally would be like... So COVID, we'd literally got to the point, we'd appointed new trustees. We're starting a new season, 2020. We're in the black, only £10,000, which is a massive thing. We're actually in the black. We've got new volunteers. The Friends and the Trust are working together. We're going through this governance review. We've had the governance review. It's been given to us. And Paul and I are like, right, we have to do this governance review. We have to dissolve the Friends.
yeah,
And form one trust and work together. And we had a trustees meeting, and then 2 days later, the pandemic hit. 2 days later, so suddenly we found ourselves having a meeting at the end of March. Malcolm, who's amazing, one of the original Friends, one of the original founders of the group, and his wife Helen, I brought them back to help me on the building, to run the building. Malcolm actually came in the building with his wife and turned all the lights off and left a lamp, which is an old theatrical tradition that you leave a light on the stage to show that you'll be back. And that was, we got a photograph. It was really emotional, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
It was
We just
really
got some momentum
emotional.
going, and then COVID came in. And
And then
next minute we're
COVID
writing
came.
COVID risk assessments and
Yeah.
COVID protection measures.
And then-
yeah.
but-
so it
and
set us
also-
back again.
But in a way, it was actually a positive thing because we had lots of people who'd booked in the venue. We had lots of procedures that we had to put in place, like health and safety, electrical checks, the ceiling to be done, all these things which hadn't been done.
So looking
We
back, it
mentioned
gave us a
the
bit of a
ceiling,
breather
isn't it? Yeah.
to regroup, I
Yeah,
think.
so it gave
Gave us a
us
bit of a breather to-
basically
yeah.
6 months. And I suppose the first thing I would say, the financial thing was because we had a huge interest loan on the building.
How much?
So we had a loan from an unnamed company, I won't say who they are, which were charging us at the time 9% interest,
okay.
which at the time was like 8% more than the base rate. And Paul...
It was because of our track record, I think. We weren't paying the instalments on time, or there was delays, or the credit history had gone down, and we were getting charged a punitive rate of interest. And then I think at one point they actually called the money in, I think.
Yeah, they called the money
They called
in.
it in, so we need the loan repaying. So that was, yeah.
So we had that, and then we had COVID where we were not taking any money. And then we also had people worrying about everyone dying, and we're worrying about this bloody building. I mean,
How are we going to save the building, yeah.
how are we
Yeah.
going to save the building? And I'm in Sheffield. So I had to get permission from the councils to actually be able to come back here as a key
yeah, okay.
worker, to actually come back in the building. So it was just...
It's surreal. It was
need
a
a violin,
surreal
don't
time,
we?
wasn't it? You just don't realise it happened 2-3 years ago.
It was tough, I think, looking back.
But it actually...
We'd give each other team talks on a Friday night.
We'd give each other team talks.
Come on,
We'd have a
Vanessa, keep going,
meeting.
keep
We'd have a
going.
meeting every Friday afternoon online
yeah.
on Zoom, which usually started with, "Can you hear me? I can't get a connection." You know? And we just brought a
Can you
couple of new trustees in, and they must have been thinking, "What are we doing?" But we got there. We got there, and I think we got there because we had such great support. I really mustn't overemphasize. I mustn't miss or explain the support that we had from the Theatres Trust, from Historic England and the Architectural Heritage Fund was significant. As much as anything guiding me through it, because obviously I am a heritage professional in many ways, but I was doing this voluntary. But also understanding, what do we need? The building's at risk. What's at risk? The ceiling. We can't operate as a venue without the ceiling being fixed. That amazing plaster ceiling.
Was it too dangerous to operate?
It was condemned.
Okay.
It was condemned. The Shaftesbury Avenue plaster case where the ceiling came down in 2014 and a theatre in Shaftesbury Avenue is because of the acoustic waves of modern sound can affect the fibrous plaster. That ceiling is held up by hemp wires.
Okay.
Hemp strung from with plaster, hemp encased in plaster, tied to wooden slats, tied to steel structure.
Let's go deeper about it, because I had a few questions planned for you about the ceiling, but you're talking about it. So how much did it cost? How was the ceiling condition before, and what did you need to do, and how much did you have to raise to renovate it? Is it finished, or is it still?
Yeah, it's done.
Okay.
There were holes all over the place. Yeah, there was water leaking in.
There's water leaking in.
It was in poor condition.
There was massive holes. I mean, literally big, huge pieces. And there's wonderful films that Historic England have done where you can see all the work. What did we have to do? Well, fortunately, we had been chosen just prior to COVID, by the Historic England as a test, as a kind of report for the building. So they'd actually commissioned someone to come and do real work on fibrous plaster, not just for here, but for all their buildings, because obviously fibrous plaster was a widely used form of interior design in the 19th century to make it look like it was a lot grander than it was.
Yeah.
It's a French invention.
There you go.
A French invention, and then basically mass-produced by English industrial companies in the 19th century. So what is now regarded as very delicate craftwork in the 19th century was mass production, taking away from the craftsmen who would have done these really ornate single. So it was really an amazing fact that Historic England done this work, and then they basically said, so the two things we had to do, we had to get money to keep the building open, not open. We had running costs of £4,500 a month.
Okay.
Right, so we had to do that. So we basically applied and got a COVID bounce back loan, so we immediately got one of those. We had £10,000 in the bank. We got 23,000 loan from the government, so that was £33,000. So we knew that would cover our costs for 6 months, and we thought COVID would be over in 3 months, like everyone did.
Yeah.
So we did that, and then basically Paul went through getting the loan through the council, didn't you?
Yeah,
Community interest loan.
Yeah, I think fortunately now looking back, I became a councillor in 2019. I can't just remember the reason I went into council work and to politics, but there we go. So I was trying to build up relationships with the City Council and Morecambe Town Council. Okay. And then again through Tom Brown, we had this problem with this mortgage.
Tom Brown was an amazing local, and he is still, a regeneration officer for the council.
So he
was the first person I spoke to when I became acting chair, when I first needed someone from the council to help me on a grant. So the very first grant we ever got was Coastal Communities Fund to sort out the heating, because I thought that was the problem. The problem was there was no heating in the building. We couldn't use it all year round. We get a heating system in, then we should be able to operate all year round. So this is all before COVID. And then the next problem was the ceiling was condemned. So then it was like...
I think Vanessa's been a bit modest there, because one of the first jobs she had to do, when we came on board in 2019, in the office was some paperwork from the Coastal Communities Fund. And we'd got through part 1 of the application, and to secure part 2, I think Vanessa had about 10 days to finish off the application. So that was one of her earliest jobs.
A full application.
Yeah. She's going tired, look, she's fallen asleep. So she had about 10 days to work on that. And again, we had help, I think, from the local MP.
And I rang up the local council officer, because I knew that you needed to tell the council you're doing this. And I met this guy on the phone, Tom Brown, and he remembers saying to me, he said to people, "Oh, I've got somebody from the Winter Gardens. Oh, don't go there. It's a basket case." And because they'd had a long history. The Winter Gardens had tried through many times. There was never any intention of not wanting to save the building. But in a way, I don't think there was the right circumstance. There was certainly not the right governance, because governance was a major issue for the people. So the governance was a major issue. That had been flagged up by all the funders over the 20 years, the governance of the trust and the building and the charities. So that's why that was important.
So just going back to Tom Brown, that's the sort of history of it. And Tom said, well, let me have words with our finance department, see what we can do, see whether they could consider making a grant to or a loan to Morecambe Winter Gardens.
Okay.
And again, through his good endeavours and his hard work and Vanessa's replying to various inquiries, they said, yeah, I think you're now fit, we'll consider it. And they then granted us £105,000 loan, which replaced the previous loans that we had at a far better rate of interest. So again, they were really helpful and considerate.
And then we could
got
plan.
us off to a good,
Yeah, we could plan. So then we worked out what the heating, what the electric was costing. And we just did with the accountants, a very quick breakdown of everything we needed to pay every month. So that's our target. Then obviously COVID happened. We'd done all that. Then COVID happened. And then in a way, we kind of went into, let's get all the restoration done. Let's work all the factors. So Historic England came to us and said, right, you're eligible for an emergency repair grant.
Okay.
We know what the costs are. And then the cost came back triple. And they said, right, you have to apply for another grant. So I applied for another grant. And then they said, right, you have to apply for another one.
How long did that all take? All that time, all that process?
14 months. But also it's great because the building was closed for 6 of those. And then it was closed again with the second lockdown. And then we put all the COVID restrictions in. And it's so huge that you could get 6 people working in it and they're all 10 metres apart. So the actual building itself lended itself for that kind of work. And once you've done one grant and you've finished the deadline and you got it done in terms of the funding spending routine, because obviously it's government money, it's got to be spent in a certain time, then we built up this reputation. So Historic England would say, right, there's another fund you can apply for. Sometimes it would be I'd have 2 weeks notice, wouldn't I, Paul?
You would indeed, yes.
And I'm okay.
I'll go again, yeah.
We're still a competition, there's no guarantee. And we just built up a team of really good experts, like structural engineers. We'd gone through this whole process of tendering originally, and then we just got people who, we've finished the job, but we want to help you. So that was fantastic. So we had Thomasons, who were amazing structural engineers from Manchester, who just helped us in every aspect. They said, I think you should apply for this, or you can apply for that. But what we have to think about is, what are we applying for? The first thing is get the building safe, get the building secure, get the building warm, structurally sound, because it wasn't safe. And I cannot impress enough that this building was not safe.
I think when I first came here, there was netting under the ceiling. So when they were having events, the netting would catch any plaster that was coming down.
Okay.
So that was probably illegal, I would have thought, but
I don't want to go there.
We don't want to go there, sorry.
We don't want to go there.
Yeah.
When did you finish the ceiling and make it safe and sound?
May 2022. And then in December 2022, we did 21, 22. It's all merging into years now.
It's all a blur.
We did the wonderful plasterwork in the underneath, that was 22. Ceiling was done in 21, and all the underpass of the horseshoe was done in 22.
I'll have to shoot all this.
And that was £680,000 of funding over 3 grants from Historic England.
And do we have to match fund some of that? I can't
And we
remember.
had to put 10% in. So we had to raise £68,000 of that.
And you were able to do it. You've been able to do it.
Yeah, we've done that.
Yeah.
We had some major...
Our volunteers are just unbelievable. We also kind of had to put in a new volunteer framework. We also had to get new volunteers, because the volunteers we had, and probably all of the volunteers who used to volunteer before I took over, have all left because it's a different regime, and they've never had to do inductions or health and safety guidance. And I think they all thought I was a bit obsessively health and safety wise, but I can tell you why. Paul can tell you we had to do that because of the insurance.
Absolutely, you've got to be able to produce your assessments nowadays. That's the first thing they want to see.
What other features did you have to renovate, or are very particular to the Winter Gardens? I've noticed this mosaic at the entrance, but you didn't have to do any work to it, did you?
Yeah, we have. You've got to understand, the first thing you have to understand when you're looking at a fundraising thing is, what is the vision? What do you want the building to be? Let's get the building structurally right. And then the building speaks for itself. The building tells you what it is. I'm a great believer in like scenography and creative ecology that is in the building. The building itself was, there for a reason, and that reason's never going to change. Architecturally, there's wonderful features why it's a Grade 2 star listed. So we did the ones that were essential. It's essential to get the ceiling done because you want it to be. So my vision, always my vision for this building was going back to the history. The history of the building used to be called the Albert Hall of the North.
Yeah.
It was built as a concert hall and a theatre, which is what makes it unusual. So when you just have a theatre, trying to turn that into a music venue can be really problematic because of the acoustics, because of the conditions. Mm-hmm. But this is actually, let's go back to why it was built. It was built as a concert hall. That's why it's acoustically amazing. That's why that plaster is the way it is. That's why you can project your voice. And then modern sound equipment affects that. So you've got to put all the things in place to create almost a magic spot, the sweet spot in the building. And then the bass sound of modern sound equipment actually cuts through the plaster and the hemp and causes it to collapse.
Okay.
So that's also part of the renovation, is to reinforce the plaster. So 1,250 new stainless steel wires are in that ceiling.
What is there behind that? Is there another structure? Is there a void?
Yeah, there's a void.
The ceiling? Okay.
There's a void. So there's about a 6-foot void where the plaster is hung from the actual structure, which is the steel structure.
Okay.
So this building is built by the same people who built train stations. So it looks like a train station in a way. Ceiling is like a train station.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I didn't notice that, but yeah. When you say it now.
Basically Manchester Central. And Handyside of Derby, who fabricated this building, made some of the greatest train stations in the UK. So this is like a train station in a way. The architecture of it is like that massive entrance dome as you walk into a station. That is what the Winter Gardens is, with a theatre proscenium arch on the back of it.
You say it's a concert hall and also a theatre. What we were talking about, the Halley Orchestra, who played there before.
So one of the things I wanted to look at as an entertainment historian is who's been in this building, change the narrative. I can honestly tell you, it was a variety theatre, like many theatres were in the UK. There was probably over 800 variety theatres at any given time from the 1890s until the 1960s. I mean, some seaside towns had 7 or 8 or 9. Morecambe had 3 in its heyday. So when people say Laurel and Hardy played here, when people say Charlie Chaplin played here, when people say, they all played everywhere because it was a commercial circuit. That's not unusual.
Okay.
When you look at a building like Blackpool Winter Gardens, they had Frank Sinatra, they had Nat King Cole, they had the same acts that the London Palladium had. So that is the number one venue historically, London Palladium and Blackpool Opera House. The rest of the theatres don't have that pedigree. But what this building has is this amazing music pedigree, classical music pedigree, which nobody had really talked about. So when I found out that Elgar had been here for 5 years, every year between 1903 and 1908, he came for the Morecambe International Music Festival. When I found out that this building was built partly for the Morecambe Music Festival for 6,000 choral voices to be heard in this building, and when I found out that the Halley Orchestra were here, I was like, it's got this amazing history of music. Then they've got the Rolling Stones, and you've got the Who.
Yeah.
Then you've got these bands, and then you've got orchestras like Jack Hilton and Mrs. Hilton.
Yeah.
So you've got this incredible music history, which most variety theatres don't have.
That's true.
So that's why I thought, well, let's go back to its music history, listen to what the building's telling you, the acoustics of the building, and then look at the vision. And is there a business need in the region for another music venue? So I looked at the historical aspect of the building, the vision, and then I went and got the evidence. That's about it. And I said to everyone, it's going to be a music venue, didn't I?
You did. Yeah, and that's what's driving us forward, yeah.
Have you done a master plan of renovating that building, organising events would bring people in Morecambe more?
Yeah, we've got all the plans. Honestly, Mark, we would not have got the funding we had without all those plans.
Yeah.
We've got a business plan, we've got an economic plan, we've got a method plan, we've got a conservation plan, We've got a regeneration plan. We've got a benefits cost ratio, which most people in culture don't even know what that means. We've got a benefits cost ratio, BCR, of rating of what the building will be. So that means for every pound the government puts in, they get so much pound back. We've got regeneration. We've basically got a complete business plan. We've gone out to the commercial operators. When we, as a trust, finish the renovation of this building, we'll still own the building, we'll still run the physical building infrastructure, but the commercial operation will be passed to a commercial operator.
Presumably, there's no names yet. You don't have any ideas.
Well, we've got a business plan which has a number of people, and we will go out to a tender process.
Yeah.
At the moment, we've got partners in the next 3 years. We've got really good partners who signed up to work with us, and we've got another grant, the CDF, Cultural Development Fund, from the government through the Arts Council. So we are now part of that portfolio of sponsored through government and funding money through the Arts Council. So we're very proud of that, because we're the first voluntary charity organisation completely run by volunteers who's ever been given that funding. Well, awarded it, because we went through a very strong competitive process. But in order to get to the point where we can actually go on that process, we had to get grants of about £130,000 for pay for the economic advice, the business advice, the REBA Stage 2.
Yeah.
All of that's done. But it's not something that you put on a website. It's all confidential information, but that is all with the councils, the local authorities, the funders, and the government. So everything is there. I can tell you probably to approximate £1,000 of what each feature is going to cost. And then we go into the next dive. So we've got the infrastructure costs, and now we're getting what we call the decorative costs. So our beautiful mosaic floor, we commissioned a report from the Tile and Ceramic Society, Architectural Society, and then we had an independent assessor, Leslie Durbin, who basically wrote a report and told us what the uniqueness of the floor and the tiles and how important they were. Then we had lots of fantastic historians help me to understand who made it. There's no archive in this building. You know, I'm a historian. You work from an archive. The building is the archive. You go, my first degree was archaeology. You go around the building and you can tell from the intervention what happened to the building. There's no archives. There's no plans. There's no legal documents, is there, Paul? There's nothing.
Very little, yeah.
The various owners
So we're
over the years
starting
just got rid. Occasionally we get people come into the building with something they found, or we've got this, and the old solicitors for the accountants in Morecambe, they've told us they've got an archive, so we can go and look at that. But when I worked in Blackpool, we had an amazing archive of everything that covered in the building for 125 years. Here we have nothing.
Before we go into your plans, how much money have you been able to raise so far in total?
Since we started in 2019, 2020, I kind of see 2019. In 2019, I was acting chair, and then 2020, through the governance review, formally I accepted the position of chair in January 2020, like 2 months before COVID, remember?
I do.
Yeah,
I
I formally accepted the position of chair 3 years ago. And since then, we've raised 4.4 million.
That's amazing.
About 17 different grants. And I'm in the process
17.
of writing three grants at the moment. That's what when I took on the chair, I thought that's what I'd be doing.
Yeah.
I know it sounds weird, that's easy, but I thought that's what I'd be doing, writing grants. My job is Director of City and Culture for the university, so I've always been able to write grants. And Paul's often said I could make a fortune as a consultant, but I don't want to do it as a consultant. I do it because I love the building and I believe there's a purpose. And I also thought I'd just be a historian, I'd write a nice book about it. But it is nuts and bolts. It's really getting your hands dirty. I mean, it is literally getting your hands dirty, putting a process in. I'm also an event producer. I produce large-scale events for my university. I have 400 events a year. So I'm an event manager and a producer. So I know health and safety. But I brought people in and we advertised for more trustees. And that's what essentially Paul really got. He said, we need more help, didn't we?
We do, yeah. I mean, that's where we're going to hopefully get you in due course, yeah. We're becoming more selective now with our trustee recruitment. So we're looking for people like quantity surveyors, financial advisors, lawyers, building inspectors, etc., to come onto the board to give Vanessa that break so she can concentrate on the grants and the events planning. But again, it all takes time, doesn't it? We're all volunteers. We're doing it voluntarily, so it takes time. But that's part of our business plan, to let Vanessa have that freedom to be our grant spokesman and our creative events person. And we're getting there. We are getting there slowly.
Yeah, it's always a really slow process. It seems like, and you need to do so much work and raise so much money, and it always takes longer than you think.
And there's so much to do, like you said.
Yeah.
And I work full time in a senior position in my university, who have been really supportive because they see that this is my research area and my love, and this gives me the creative energy to do something and make a difference in my hometown. So there's lots of...
I agree with that. They need a special mention, I think. Your university have been amazing.
I think they've given me a lot of support, and they also know me that I would kind of half kill myself, which I was trying to do both. But I couldn't do it without all the people around us. We are like one family. We've just got the volunteers are amazing, and I include Paul and all of us in that. I mean, and I think what I'm good at is understanding data, and it's data that you get things done. So they've always been amazing volunteers in the Winter Gardens.
I think Mark's perhaps seen some of that this morning with the volunteers coming in today on a Friday morning, setting the tables up, going
but
to
the thing
shop.
is, you see that, but you don't track it.
Yeah. It's not recorded anywhere.
It's not recorded. So ever since I came in, I put a recording system in. How many hours have you done? How many people have come through the door? How much money have we taken? So it's data. So people come to me and the government says, well, how can you prove? Well, we had 17,000 people in last year, which was a 50% increase on the year before. We had 11,000. And then we had 17,000 hours. These are figures. And they were like, oh, can you prove it? Yeah, here's the sheets.
And I think that was perhaps absent in the earlier governance. They didn't have those records, that record keeping.
And they probably haven't been told how to do it. It's really simple. It's really simple.
Do you think you've been able to raise so much money so far, and you are going to probably more in the future?
I've got another 5 million to raise.
And is it like you would like to raise another 5 million?
I have to raise another 5 million.
To finish the project.
To finish the building.
With the building plan,
Yeah, can you share a little bit of statistics on it? How many volunteers are there, and maybe the structure of the organisation?
We currently have 45 volunteers, and that includes the trustees, and the volunteers are split into 2 different groups, but we all operate by the same code of practice. We have what we call the restoration and maintenance team, who are mostly predominantly men of a certain age, who have got skills as craftsmen or joiners, French polishers, plumbers, electricians, painters, decorators, really practical. So they would save us about £10,000–15,000 a year just on maintenance.
Great.
So they come in every Tuesday and Wednesday. I call them the Tuesday-Wednesday Club. And we have a couple of women who've joined now who help with the French polishing, or they're really good, because there's no aspect anyone can be. They've got to have a skill, they've got to have a occupation that aids, and that's headed by Malcolm O'Neill, who was one of the original people who saved the building from demolition in the 80s, and he's a plumber.
Yeah.
A bit like a Super Mario, I would say. He's a bit like a Super Mario character, isn't he?
He is,
and his wife Helen, who is our admin support and does all the kind of paperwork and the bureaucracy of the building, answering all the inquiries. We've got those, and then we have the weekend volunteers, who basically run the cafe, run the tombola, and we've trained them up. So we've got duty managers, they've gone through health and safety training, they've gone through first aid training, didn't have any of this before, gone through all that, all legitimate, all done, and a code of conduct. So if anything goes wrong, we've got a process which Paul heads of looking at how we can work things, and a financial check as well. So all the financial things, we've got a process put in. And so altogether, there's 45. And every year we get new people come and other people leave because they might have got a job, or they might have moved away, or sadly they might have died. So we've 17,500 hours last year, and we had 55,000 people through the building and 45 events in the building, including shows, a panto for the first time in 40 years, a wonderful art exhibition by Luke Jerram,
poetry festival,
a film festival, and then obviously we had the Levelers in, we had Hawkwind in, and then this year, really now we've got the funding, we're just kind of not slowing down, but we're just looking at ways we can get different offers in. So last week we had an art fair. We want to kind of show the community they can be part of that. So we're working with community partners, so they bring different offers in. So it's not just about the money, it's all about
Community engagement.
community engagement in a real way,
Yeah,
not just
meaningful.
like come to a workshop and tell us what you want. Come in the building, use the building, experience the building, and tell us how you want to proceed. So we have this amazing, what is it now? First week in July, we've had 12,500 people through since Easter weekend. And we only open weekends. So an average could be 500 to 1,000 a day, couldn't it, on a Saturday or Sunday?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. It's getting busier, yeah.
It gets busier and busier.
Those places are amazing to bring communities together. On the podcast, there's been a few people who've talked about it, the benefits of those places, specifically for communities, during pandemics or not. It's really amazing and really key to places and areas to have that in cities.
And they donate. So every weekend, everyone knows that every penny in the building goes back on the building. Everybody knows that nobody takes a penny. Everybody knows we don't have any paid staff. They also know with this new grant we've got, which is 3.2 million, it's going to be a sea change for the building. And they know that there will be paid people, but it'll be a project. They will be paid to deliver the project, which is different to being paid to run the building.
Do you know if the success of the raising so much money is due to how structured the organization is, or how important the theatre is for Morecambe and the council and the area around?
Well, I can answer and let Paul answer it from his legal profession. I would say the building's always been important to Morecambe and always been on a national register since 2006.
Okay.
It hasn't had any money from 2009 to 2019, and it had failed in all its applications. So I would say, without the governance review, the success of this building, they might have got money from Historic England for the ceiling, but the trajectory of upwards, of momentum, is down to the fact that we were open and transparent. And as the council said at the time, we not only went for a governance review, we actually implemented it. And Paul was the one who had to implement it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would think that, like say, Winter Gardens is the jewel in a crown in Morecambe. I think Morecambe's on the up with the Eden project and Frontierland and other developments. But I think, like Vanessa's just touched on there, I think the one thing I'm proudest of throughout my 4 or 5 years as a director is I think that third parties now, they can trust us. They see us as a safe pair of hands. They know we've got a governance in place. They know we mean it and we're meaningful. So I think that's been the big game changer for me. People look at us now and say, yeah, Winter Gardens is now in safe hands. Yeah, it's a safe pair of hands.
And we have
and
to
you can deal with them and they'll be honest, they'll be open with you, they'll be coherent. Yeah, they're not hiding anything. They're not doing it for their own personal ends or objectives. Yeah.
And I said to Paul when we went for the governance review, if that governance review says that I'm not fit to be chair, I won't be chair. That's why I wouldn't take the position, would I?
Yeah.
Only as acting. I had to go through a process because I realised I'd literally been given it as I walked into the door. That's not a firm process.
And I like to think now that with the other directors, we do challenge Vanessa. You know, she's challenged and she has to account, and we all are. And so it's nice. We've got a nice working relationship.
It is.
Yes,
it is
it's
challenging,
nice, it is challenging. Yeah,
and I do laugh. They say, "Oh, it's a benevolent dictatorship," but it isn't. It's a really, really great debate.
It is.
And Richard, who's our electrical engineer, he's doing all the health and safety policies. And I don't get personal. I did at first where he said, well, we haven't done this right. And I went, what am I supposed to do? I've got to do this. I'm not taking it personally. I'm going to help you, he said. You know, Jihan, our treasurer, he's doing all the procurement now. I don't have to worry about that. Paul's doing the legal. And now I've learned that if they don't do it straight away, I don't just go and do it. I'll just wait, don't I?
Which is nice.
I'm not as bad as I was,
Yeah.
I think I was in a state of emergency where the world was changing, COVID was happening, the building was falling down. And I felt it as a personal way, and then I really share the burden now.
Yeah. It's
so
hard to delegate.
It is good.
But it's different when you're employing people, isn't it? You expect quicker turnaround and quicker response, but when we're all volunteers and we've all got our other things to do, it's, But she's learned to accept that now, so it's nice. You get a bit of breathing space. And
they've actually learned to accept that if I send an email at 3:00 in the morning, don't
Correct.
think it's because of anything other than that's the only time I've got.
You replied to one of my emails at 10:00. Oh, it's not too late.
At night, that's early.
That's early.
It's early for you. Well, it's, I mean, I
Mine
go to
goes
bed
in the
at
middle of the night and the wife says, what does she want now? What does Vanessa want? Ping, ping.
I tell people to turn their alerts off. I'm really sorry about that.
I never remember, so mine's pinging all night
I
long,
forget, because obviously I work full time and I divide my week religiously into periods. And what's great now is, I've been back here backwards and forwards for the last 5 days. I'm going back today and tomorrow. The volunteers will be in the building. They'll be running it. Paul will pop down. Sometimes he's a handy person on the tombola. Sometimes he's there. His wife's a volunteers in the kitchen.
Yeah,
nothing's too mucky for us to get involved in. And we realised that when we went out for trustees, we had people who thought it was like sitting on a committee and getting free tickets. So it was like, no.
Not here.
You're not here.
Not here, no.
It really is.
You're going to get your hands dirty.
Just,
Get ready.
I think we've got very different sleep patterns because I go to bed around 9:30, 10.
Well, you've got young children, Matt.
Yeah, I've got young children. So they wake
I
up
only
really
sleep
early.
5 hours, Mark.
And it's like, oh, well, I don't know how you do.
There's nothing greater than to know that you've made an impact in your hometown.
That's true, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. A lot of the reservations, and I think, when you grow up in a small town and you get all those issues, it can be quite emotional coming back. And I've always had my family here. And when I did come back and took on the building, I got a lot of flack. I got a lot of trolling locally. Got a lot of negativity.
We did, yeah. She was vilified quite heavily.
I was vilified quite a bit.
Facebook.
I was
In the press as well?
I was a woman, I was an academic, and I lived in Sheffield. I was some fuddy-duddy blue-stocking woman who lived in a university ivory tower. But what I got support from was the community, the people who were working in the building, and the businesses, and who saw me as straightforward and direct.
Straight talking.
And I think also Paul, obviously, he's got a lot of local knowledge, and he would say to me, I said, so-and-so wants to talk to me. He would say, well, yeah, they're okay or they're not. But I really concentrated to me, it was the national funders, national supporters, Historic England. I'm answerable to the legislatory bodies, I'm answered to Historic England. I'm answered to Theatres Trust. I'm answered to the people who their job is to save and impose some form of process to make sure we, as a small voluntary organisation, look after this building. They hadn't been allowed in the building for 10 years until I took over. So they welcomed us with open arms. So it was a two-way process.
Obviously, I live in Manchester. What would you say there is to do in Morecambe if I want to spend the day in Manchester with my family?
Well, I would say that our business plan is part of the green touring route. So basically, from Manchester to Morecambe is 1 hour, 2 minutes on the new bypass.
Okay.
And then you could go up to Glasgow in 2 hours. So if you're a band, a wonderful band, you could play the Apollo, or you could play Bridgewater, or you could play any of the wonderful music venues, zip up the motorway to Morecambe in an hour, backload on the back of our building, no steps, straight onto the stage. Wonderful new acoustic shell fitted, all the lights and sound fitted, finish it, get back in there, upload, 3:00 in the morning, up in Glasgow in 2 hours.
Good sales pitch.
Boom, there we go.
That's it.
Yeah.
And economically viable, green, eco-viable, because you're not going up and down the country, you're part of a tour, and also bringing music. We've got 1.3 million people living an hour from the Winter Gardens. That is our catchment area. That is the economic base. People from Penrith, from Kendal, who don't have to then go to Manchester to watch a gig. They can come to Morecambe. And that's our business model, and that's been tested and tried.
That's really interesting. Can you share more information on that, on the business model? What are the summary or highlights of that? Information like this is really interesting. Your catchment area.
Well, we looked at the demographics, we looked at figures, we looked at secondary spend. So what you have is a business cost ratio. We work with a company called 4th Street, who we basically went out to competition. Don't forget, I work in this area for the university. So you've got to have a business plan, you've got to have an economic plan. And as much as I'm a cultural person, culture has to have either someplace in the regeneration or someplace in community. Some aspects of culture could never pay for themselves, but the benefits they bring in terms of health, being, in terms of ambition, in terms of creativity, in terms of vibrancy are significant. And other parts of culture are economically viable and regenerative viable. But then you have probably the hardest thing to quantify is pride in place. What does pride in place mean? What makes you feel proud of your hometown? I never felt proud of my hometown for a long time. Now I feel proud of it again. And that's what's a wonderful, intangible thing. So on a business side, okay, I want it to be a music venue. That's my gut feeling. I work in theatre, I work in production and festivals. Let's prove it. And so we got a company in who went out to test my hypothesis. And I remember halfway through the process, they said, oh, you're right. And I went, well, do you think I was going to be wrong? They went, no, but we would have challenged you. I said, well, I want you to challenge me. I want you to take this on and say, yes, you're right or wrong, and I want you to give me the evidence that I can use as a business case. I don't want you to come and fit it into what I think I want to see. I want the facts. And so we did the demographics. We got evidence from the audience agency that told us what people were from certain demographics are going to. It's a massive, complex piece of economic work. And I've done it for the last 15 years. I just applied it to my hometown.
That's great.
But I'm not doing it for anyone else. I'm only doing it for my hometown because I do it as a job for the university.
There you go. I've always been proud of my hometown. Yeah, I've never fallen out of love with it. Yeah, I must admit. And going back to your earlier question, you'll need more than one day if you want to come to Morecambe. Yeah, you'll need a couple of days. Yeah, there's plenty to do. Come at Vintage Weekend. Yeah, there's lots going on. You've got, nice beaches. You can have a game of golf at Morecambe Golf Club. You can go on bird watch at Leighton Hall. You go to the Lake District walking.
I am not being negative. I love Morecambe, but what I would say in all the 35 years that I was stranded in Sheffield, and obviously I spent many places at other seaside resorts working, I never forgot the sunset. I never forgot the bay.
I was just going to come on to that. And at the end of the day, you'll have a sunset, like a free, magical evening's entertainment.
Where's the nearest campsite?
Oh, there's plenty around Morecambe.
Westgate, a couple in Westgate. There's some
a couple
nice
in
ones
Westgate.
at
There's a
Silverdale,
couple. There's a few.
Yeah.
Great.
And in fact, they really thank us because the people who come to the Winter Gardens quite often are people, like when Hawkwind came, they had loads of people camping.
Absolutely.
And loads. And we get a lot of people who've got holiday caravans and coming in. Obviously, part of your business model is secondary spend and also the demographics of the people who come. Mm-hmm. So obviously, in some ways, what you class in a very clumsy way is a more affluent audience who've got more money to spend, secondary spend into the town. That's part of your business model. But we've also got a very important strand of our work of what is the future for the creative people of Morecambe. So we have a really important strand of our grant, which is called Young Creatives, where we're working with Lancaster and Morecambe College and a range of creative partners across the region to provide an opportunity for 16 to 18-year-olds to be part of the creative industry or to be part of the conservation industry. They can spend 2 weeks with us. They can spend 2 weeks with From the Fields, Kendall Calling. But what we're going to look at is a whole range of future opportunities over the next 3 years for those local people and local young people.
So what are you not able to do at the moment with the theatre or in the theatre and you would like to do it? And what do you need in terms of funding and renovation to do it? We touched a little bit on it with Paul earlier on fire exits and the capacity, how you can increase capacity.
The funding we've got from the government is very infrastructure, capital development. So we spent 2 years worrying about toilets, haven't we?
We have.
I'm talking about toilets.
It's on the agenda every week. Toilets, toilet block, drains.
Every week, toilets. So we're going to build a new toilet block, 2 stories. We've got funding for that. We've got funding for fire exits. So this building was built for 2,500 capacity, probably 3,000 because people are smaller and shorter then and not quite as wide. 5-7 inches smaller. You know, we're physically a lot stronger and bigger than we were 100 years ago. You only have to look at some of the seats. You're thinking, how on earth do they sit there? And there's no leg room. So now, probably when it's complete, it'll be 2,300. That will be 1,200 standing.
That's enormous.
1,200 standing. Yeah, but you say it's enormous. It's got to get over 1,600 to cover its costs as a music venue. So that the sweet spot for touring bands is 12 to 2,000. So that's what we're aiming for. Anything under 1,000, you only get tribute bands and up-and-coming acts. Everything over 1,200 to 1,600, you get the bands who would go to, like, you know, big music venues like the Apollo. That's the audience. We want the people who will go to the Apollo.
Yeah.
We don't want the people who's going to go to the Working Men's Club down the road with a tribute act.
Okay.
We've got a very, very clear sense.
And a very clear ambition, what you want to do.
Yeah, and so
What you want to achieve.
then we unlock fire exits, we unlock all the second story, and then that's seated. And then we have standing downstairs, so we can have flexible space down here, still have a cafe and do stuff like that. And then we unlock the gods, that amazing, very, very sheer. And at the front of the building is 1/3 of the building hasn't been used for 50, 60 years, which is would have been the smoking gallery, which is the terrace. And that is real, my ambition, to kind of get this project undergoing that we've got the funding for now, finish off a lot of the capital works, go through the procurement, which Jihan and others are going to do, appoint a design team, appoint a project management team, appoint a volunteer coordinator, and appoint an engagement officer. And by October, I can then concentrate on the next 3 years of raising the 5 million for the rest of the building.
There you go. Simple as that.
You were saying, there's a tendering process going on at the moment.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about it?
Well, we're government funded, so we've got to go through a very open and transparent process, which of course the government always follows. And so we've got to make sure we are demonstrating that all companies who are conservation have the necessary requirements and the framework, because you can't just have anyone work on this building. So we have literally putting out the process now. Our tendering process has been done by Jihan, and the rest of our trustees have incorporated it. Paul's working on the partnership agreement.
Okay.
We've spent 3 months just going through paperwork, and I keep on saying to our funders, you know, we're behind. No, but you're really ahead of anything because you get back to us. So yeah, we're going through that process at the moment. So we'll start the work. We're already slipped, but I think every government project slipped in timing, but we'll catch up, we'll get back. And then in 3 years' time, in April 2026, we'll open, because we're going to close every 6 months to do all the capital works, and we'll open with a 1,600 capacity venue, with a new acoustic tower, shell, with sound and lighting. There's no infrastructure, Mark. There's no electric, right? The whole building needs to be
Fire alarm's
rewired.
defective.
Yeah.
We need a new fire alarm.
We've got a fire alarm system, but it needs to be updated.
It needs to be upgraded. Needs rewiring.
When the building next door was taken out in 82, the whole infrastructure of this building was run next door. So we've got to put new infrastructure into a Grade 2 star listed building that never had it. So that's why it's important we work with the funding bodies. But they understand that. So we bring experts in. So we're looking at getting a scheme where we can put the decorative work back. People keep saying to me, oh, you're going to bring the plaster back. Well, no, because the plaster's safe. It gets checked every year now. Just to get that plaster checked costs £5,000 a year.
£5,000?
Yeah. To get a report that it's safe.
Which we need, again, for insurance purposes and for third parties, That's what they want to see. That's what they want to have documented.
So we got that documentation.
But we know it works now, so we know how the system works.
So you asked us what are our biggest nightmares or worries. So I'll let Paul tell you his, because he's just mentioned insurance.
Mine's insurance now, looking back, But you touched upon the seating previously. When we first came in, there was no seating here.
Okay.
So by good fortune, we tracked down where the original
the
seats...
Theatres Trust.
Oh, not
Theatres
at all.
Trust.
There was no seating at all.
No,
not
there was
even
in the
first floor.
On the first floor, the original seats had been sold by one of the previous unscrupulous owners in the 80s. And the place who sold them, the Leyland Masonic, contacted the Theatres Trust, said they were closing down. Did the Morecambe Winter Gardens want their seats back? So the Theatres Trust were really excited.
So we got all excited, didn't we?
And rang us up and said, you can have your seats back. And then we contacted Leyland Masonic and they said, you have to buy them back.
You have to pay for them.
have to pay for them.
So that was a bit ironic, wasn't it? Buying our own seats back. But
so
never
we
mind.
bought our own seats back, but they came back completely reconditioned,
They
all
did.
fireproofed,
They did.
all beautiful. So we did a campaign, Take Your Seat, and that was the first time we really felt that the local people were supporting us, get the seats back. Or the Friends did that. So those seats will go back and so in 2023, 2026, we'll have new wiring, new electric, a reinforced circle, 5 exits so you can get full access because people with wheelchairs and limited mobility can't access the building upstairs. And we'll have full access and the capacity for 1,600. And then maybe I will bring back one of those world famous orchestras who used to play here. And that will be stage 2 finished. And then the next stage is the front of the building. But once we do that, it will cover its costs. It will be an operator who will rent the building off us or hire the building or have a split share because we don't know yet. It's a different business model. It depends on which operator wants it. And we won't have to worry about finding the monthly revenue. Our biggest worry is we have to find £45,000 a month. And all the grants we get are capital. We don't get revenue grants.
Okay.
So that's my worry. We've got enough money to cover the capital revenue. That's what I worry about. And kind of how many, I kind of say my fundraising policy, the capital one's relatively straightforward. You put a process in, you have a business plan, you've got a vision, you've got a narrative and you prove it. We've been shortlisted for 2 grants at the moment. I've just got to write them both by the 19th of July. But the revenue side, we don't get grants for revenue. That's why COVID was a blessing in some ways, because for the first time, we got money, business support, didn't we?
We did.
I really would like High Point to survive until 2026 and come back here and do a second episode of
You'll be invited
saying
back.
how
have we done
has
it?
been,
How have we done it?
what has changed, and what are your next plans?
I think also the building was closed for a long time. Even when they reopened it, even when the Friends tried to do things, they do car boot sales, they do this, they do that. We were open every week, 12 o'clock until 4 on a Saturday, 11 till 4 on a Sunday. We do tours. You go online, you can book them. We have a wonderful tombola stall, which is actually my sister. And she's just won fundraiser of the year. Not me, with all my millions. She runs it. And she's amazing. Local people bring her things in every week for the tombola. We also have a merchandise store, which local people hand print things for us and we sell. So we have that. We have a cakes. We have a cafe, which Paul's been known to make a dab hand at making a hot chocolate, haven't you?
Occasionally, yeah. Occasionally. I'm improving. Yeah, we have a catering department. Yeah. A very healthy catering department.
Well, a catering group of volunteers department makes us to be some
Sounds nice.
Sounds better,
nice.
yeah.
Catering
we have
department.
A catering team.
We have a panini making
We have
machine
panini
coming.
making. And,
Yeah.
So
We're
everyone's
expanding. We are
got
expanding.
a function, and then we have a fundraising group.
Got a small bar.
And then we also work in partnership with our colleagues and friends next door, Solly, who does wonderful events. And he, when we have an event, he comes in and runs the bar and gives us a percentage. So we work in partnership, and what we want to do is what we do benefits local businesses around us. Mm-hmm. So it's got to benefit them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So have you got an idea on figures? Because for previous episodes, especially with the Theatres Trust, we talked about for every pound, I was going to say penny, every pound spent in coming to Morecambe Winter Gardens, how much is spent on local businesses? Do you have any ideas?
No, because we're not at that point. We're basically looking at future projection, and what we're looking at is we've got cross samples, so we're looking at the economic analysis. But that kind of figures is. I'm not saying it's not important. It is important, but at this moment in time, what is important is future projections. So we get 400 people. I can tell you what they spend here. But I know the evidence you're looking at, but we've not done that for us because we've done it for 2 or 3 gigs. We've done it for the 2 gigs that we went to.
Okay.
So we've done but that's all in the business plan. We're very clear what bracket our spend comes into. We're very clear what our audience are. But We've done it in a very strong treasury business model. It's the Green Book business model. We've applied to that, which isn't different from a kind of cultural model. But
I'm
we know it
hoping that we'll
stacks up.
complete the next phase at the same time as Eden might be open across the road. I mean, that would be amazing.
I've got a few last questions to finish the episodes. One of the questions you've already answered it. What's your worst memory of the whole process of renovating?
My worst memory was to do with the insurance premium on the building.
Yeah.
Again, when we inherited the directorship and the chairmanship, we had
3 claims.
We had an insurance policy that had 3 claims against it, 3 huge claims. So we were very high risk. Again, because we didn't have any procedures in place or any policies in place, the insurers looked at us and thought, Winter Gardens is a very, very high risk model.
Okay.
In the first year that we were on board, we just about got the insurance through. But when we went into more detail about the application form, there was some misleading information in there. There was some untruths in there. The insurance picked up on that. And then they said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to cancel your insurance. I went then to try and go out to the market. Again, nobody was even considering insuring theatres at that stage.
Right.
So we were literally running out of time. I think it was the end of May, 21. Can't just remember. COVID had kicked in. Was it 20?
COVID had kicked in, and a lot of insurance companies were
Just
not
wouldn't touch
renewing because they
theatres,
didn't want to pay the cost for COVID. So it wasn't just the previous history of the building, it was the national circumstances of COVID, wasn't it?
It was, and I think there'd been a big claim down in London somewhere. We had a theatre caught fire or something, and they had to spend millions on it. So we were literally, the clock was ticking. At some point, we would just not be insured, which meant game over.
Yeah.
So that was my personal, low point. And then Vanessa somehow pulled a consultant, out of the bag in Sheffield, and he performed miracles. And he got a very, very competitive quote. Because the first insurers that we were with said, well, we might reconsider if you pay, I think it was something like £67,000 premium. I can't just remember the exact figure. And we said we haven't got it. I just said we haven't got it. So whether they were, holding us to ransom in a certain extent. So we
pay £16,000 a year. Still high. So people don't understand.
But the insurers have been good to us. They've been really helpful.
Brilliant.
Honestly, every time we have an event, we tell them what's on, and they said, that's great, thanks for telling us. And then they'll point out some special condition which we have to comply with. And then, we'll tidy up our process, make sure we're covered. But they've been really helpful as well.
They've been fantastic. And I think the most important thing is dialogue. We have dialogue with all of our funders, all of our stakeholders, and all of the people that we are liable for.
Correct.
I think the other thing about the insurance side...
And we like to be loyal, don't we?
We're just very loyal. I think you've also got to think about... I suppose it's difficult to say it really, but what you've got to think about is even big companies have a conscience. They want to help people. They want to help as well. They're all human. They're all individuals. They all are impressed with the story. I mean, we had the King last year, Prince Charles, when he was Prince of Wales, came to celebrate our 125th anniversary. He stood on this very stage with our volunteers. For our volunteers, it was just probably the best day of their lives. And one of them said it was the best day of his life, Bernie. He was 81 at the time. And our Ted, who'd been involved in the building for 20 odd years, he died this last year. I was so pleased that he got to meet the Prince, the King. It was a fantastic day for them. And the King has been involved in supporting the building and gave a donation to our crowdfunding. We've got this amazing appeal. Because it's not just about grants from government, it's about making sure the local people still... They think, we got loads of money, Vanessa. No, we haven't. We're raising this is like a drafty barn of a building. It's like, it doesn't just rain, it pours. If something goes wrong, it goes wrong, doesn't it?
Say again how much, what your running costs are?
60,000 a year. So we have to find £4,500 a month.
To break even.
To cover our costs.
Okay.
Right? Before, we have to put all the funding in for match. They have to put all the funding in. So our turnover last year was about 110. So that meant we could cover our running costs and put £50,000 in match for the first year of our grant.
Okay.
So we've got to raise another £50,000 on top next year. And then the following year, we've got to match it with more because we've got to prove that our business model's improving.
But we've got 3 lovely tenants at the front of the building. I don't think you've noticed them yet, but
I did notice them when I arrived.
We've got one company that does productions. Yeah, he's excellent tenant. We've got a lovely chocolate shop at the front, and we have a lovely vintage shop. So that, and we're on good terms with them. We try and keep them busy, so that gives us some small income for the month.
Great.
Yeah,
and then we get donations. Every weekend we'll probably get £250 a weekend donations from the public. Just give us donations. So we probably what 12 grand a year, just public donations in the theatre. People, pounds, shilling, pence.
You never realise how much those places cost to run.
People have no idea. So you get people saying, well, I'd like to do a 2-hour community session. I was like, I can't do it. We can't do it. We can't open it, you know? We can't open it for that. I mean, we worked out it's £300-400 a day when we open fully. Yeah. You know, in terms of production. So what we say to people, we're doing things at the weekend, we're open anyway, come and do things then. But as soon as somebody puts a ticket price and wants it to be a private or they want it to be commercial, then they've got to pay. And we don't charge a lot. And actually, we take more just selling teas and coffee. But we also want to show it's a viable business. Yeah. And that's one thing we know from all the music promoters who worked with us. They just said, look, Vanessa, your costs are cheap. The production, what we've got to bring in, sound, lighting, equipment, like you just said, put that 10 scale by a band, and it could be £6,000 for them to bring all that production in. Yeah. So by actually having that production in-house, a full touring band will bring their own in, as you know, but that medium size just needs something to plug into, don't they? They can just add to it. Yeah, yeah. So having the production, having the equipment, having the sound and the lighting, and that's the next thing we're doing this winter, getting rid of all the heat loss that goes through the building, cutting this incredible fly tower with a temporary acoustic shell creates the conditions where, not that a band can come and just plug in, but the band has more infrastructure support in the venue. Yeah. So that reduces the risk for them, also enables community groups to come in and pay the charge to hire the venue, but understanding they don't have the additional costs to bring it in. And so that's the kind of balancing act as well. So
we have a gas meter, but we just don't look at it when there's an event on. No one there looks at it. Just costs a fortune to heat the building.
And we don't want to put gas in because we are very carbon neutral. We want to look at that. And we're part of this scheme within the area, which is its own energy scheme, looking at creating its own energy scheme from the bay. So we've gone into that and we hope to hook into whatever Eden do. But we can't wait for Eden. That's 3 years away. We've got to do it now.
Do you have any other spaces apart from the theatre and the auditorium itself that you could rent?
There's loads. There's rooms all over the place, but we're not. There's 2 bars downstairs. There's 2 bars in the circle. There's this incredible space at the front, which is the terrace. You haven't seen that yet, have you?
I need to go now. I haven't seen it.
And the terrace and the outside area. That's a whole third of the building, but that's where we want to get the funding to put like a restaurant and cafe. And we'd have to then go through the back. There's a huge cellar downstairs, which goes right up to halfway up the auditorium. And there's different rooms, and there's the dressing rooms for 60 people behind.
Amazing.
People have looked at there's been a business model of looking at it as a community creative space, and different people using it. It would have needed subsidies of £250,000 a year. And that was back in 2010. So that subsidies probably doubled. Yeah. When we're looking at a model that there's no subsidies, it covers its own costs, but still has a community interest benefit, and it's run by local trustees.
I can't wait for 2026.
We will invite you.
Neither can I. I can get maybe more than 5 hours
might get to
sleep.
sit next to the King when he's out there as well. Because the King said he wanted to come back as well. So
I'll give you my address so you can send me a card.
Well, we'll have you back in 3 years.
2026 we'll get the auditorium done, but we've still got to get the front of the building done. But that can be done as we're doing this. Yeah, yeah. We just need to find a model of getting 60, 70 grand a year to cover the running costs of the building, so it's not on us to find it. And that frees us to do the rest of the building.
I've got 2 last questions. The first one is, can you... I've asked Sophie from Burnley Empire last week about how crucial the Theatre's Trust involvement was for them. And I know we've discussed it earlier, how important they were for you to survive. Can you explain? And I would do a small short of it and just quote
the
them.
Theatre's Trust was the first person I came to. I knew Claire through my work in Blackpool. And it was the first grant we got after the coastal communities was the Theatre's Trust for the governance review. And it was essential. And, we have feisty discussions, and Claire's always saying, it's a theatre. It's built as a theatre and a concert hall. So even if we put an acoustic shell in, we're not affecting the theatrical structure. But there is a reality that this building cannot operate as a full-time theatre in today's current creative climate. But what the Theatre's Trust did, and essentially still do, is give me that challenge, give me that support, give me that specialist knowledge, give me contacts in acoustic and sound and lighting. They're always there for that specific performance-related side, that this building will always be a performance-related venue.
Yeah.
And they've been crucial. But that governance review, plus we've just got another grant from them, which is going to help me at the next stage develop an application to the Heritage Lottery. Because bizarrely, of all the funders we've gone for, we've never had money from them. Maybe because it wasn't quite right, but the time is going to be right in the next 12 months to start talking with the lottery. And we've already had that discussion with the lottery, and the Theatre's Trust have been instrumental with that. I think there are bigger supporters, but they will always challenge. But that's what's positive about it. So, yeah, couldn't have done it without them, basically.
Last question. Who would you suggest as a future guest for High Point for the podcast?
I would suggest one in Sheffield. I would suggest the Montgomery Theatre,
Okay.
which has got funding from the Architectural Heritage Fund to do a analysis, and they've got funding from the Future High Street. I'd suggest them because it's not a beautiful building, but it's a building that young people and creative people, and it's a place for young people. And it's a place where you can go and practice your ballet class. And it's a place where you can do your drum kit. And it's a place that it works with disadvantaged youth. So it's not a beautiful theatre like this. And it's not a theatre of old grandeur like the Burnley. But it's a real theatre at the heart of the community of Sheffield. And the people who run it are inspiring.
Great.
So I would recommend the Montgomery. I really would.
We'll get in touch.
And they've also got a big capital project, and they worry about lift access like I do. We have coffees and we talk about lifts. How exciting life is now. At least I don't talk to them about toilets.
Yeah,
they've got plenty of toilets. They've got plenty of toilets. They haven't got any
Can they
lifts.
give us one, yeah?
Yeah.
Great. Well, with the seagulls, thank you very much.
Finale on time again, yeah.
And I can't wait for 2026.
Thanks for having us, yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you. And thank you, Theatre's Trust, Architectural Heritage, Arts Council England. I can reel off all of our funders. It's like...
Yeah, so many now, yeah. Lancaster City Council, Morecambe Town Council,
Morecambe Town Council, University of Sheffield, Lancashire County Council.
They all keep us going, honestly.
Boost Lancashire, and then possibly another 3 to add in the next 6 weeks if we get the money.
Morecambe Bid, yeah, Chamber of Commerce.
Morecambe Bid, Chamber of Commerce.
Bid, yeah.
Oh no, the Chamber of Commerce haven't given us money. You
Have they not yet?
Them. Yeah.
I've not had time
Missed
yet.
that one
I'll
yet.
work on them. No, I'll work on them, yeah.
There you
But-
go.
Yeah,
we are,
and
yeah.
also our funders, but also we're fundraising now. So even if you can't put it in the film, spacehive.com/Morecambe Winter Gardens. Because it's not just about the money, it's about showing that a volume of people care about this building enough to support it. So even if you give a couple of quid, it's just about showing that people want to save this building.
Great.
Thank
I
you.
forgot to say, we can follow the Winter Gardens on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well.
Yeah, I would say
LinkedIn?
Twitter and Facebook are our most best ways of getting hold of us. And also you can follow me, Professor Vanessa, on Twitter, Morecambe WG on Winter Gardens on Twitter, and Morecambe WG on Facebook.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.